Hello, everyone, and welcome to McGill Cares webcast series supporting family and informal caregivers. I'm Claire Webster, a former caregiver, certified dementia care consultant, and founder of McGill University's Dementia Education Program. I work with a dynamic team of leading healthcare professionals to oversee the program, who include Dr. José Moret from the Division of Geriatric Medicine and Dr. Serge Gauthier, Professor Emeritus, formerly of the McGill University Research Center for Studies in Aging. These webcasts are made possible thanks to the generosity of donors, and I would like to sincerely thank the Zeller Family Foundation for sponsoring today's webcast. We have a very special guest today. Her name is Moira Welsh. She is the investigative reporter from the Toronto Star. She has co-authored investigations that have won 3 national newspaper awards and a Mickener Award for Public Service Journalism. Starting as a breaking news reporter, she soon joined the investigative team writing on social justice, the environment, and the lives of people living in seniors' homes. Moira recently wrote a very hopeful book about long-term care called Happily Ever Older, and she is here today to talk to us about her book. Welcome to McGill Cares.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
So I think to begin today, before we start talking about the revolutionary approaches to long-term care that are outlined in the book, as an investigative journalist, can you tell me why you chose to write this book instead of really one talking about, unfortunately, the horrors of long-term care that were exposed during the pandemic?
Absolutely. It's really interesting. I feel like my approach to writing this book, the positivity that the book brings, is actually disruption. That is my goal, is to disrupt the current system with examples of homes that have been, many of which have been in existence for a very long time, to show that change is possible, it has succeeded, and that people do not have to live in these institutional models. And I think that in doing so, there's the possibility for a greater change and greater awareness. And I'll bring this back to a story that I did in 2018 for the Toronto Star, and it was on a home in Peel Region, and the home used a model from the United Kingdom called the butterfly model, and it went into one household for people with cognitive decline, and it really did transform the way that the residents and the workers lived and worked within that home. And so after that, I found it so interesting that so many people in the industry had no idea that programs and philosophies like this existed. And so the response from families, from children, people of all ages, and within the industry inspired me to go out and travel across North America and into the Netherlands to find ways to show how change can happen. So I did all of that before the pandemic hit. And I wrote a prologue about the pandemic, but I really believe that the thesis of the book stands, these stories that can upend the old ways. And I think we saw that more than ever, how important the emotional connection is for people living in homes, how we saw people wither when they weren't able to connect with their families and caregivers who they'd gotten to know quite well over the years. So I think my position on that stands, pandemic or not. It's a new way of showing how we can move forward.
So let's get the topic of COVID out of the way at the beginning. And so in your book, you say there'll be a generation of adult children who live with the trauma of knowing their mother or father spent the final moments of life with no one to hold a hand or speak quiet words of love. So what have you seen out there?
I and many journalists spent every day writing, especially through the first year of the pandemic, on long-term care. And I think because of my book research, I realized that there was a bigger, deeper story around the social and emotional connections that we have with our parents or spouses in long-term care, including the workers who are in long-term care as well. And so I spoke to families who just crumbled with the stories that they told me. And there was one lovely man whose father was in a retirement home in downtown Toronto, and his dad had cognitive decline and couldn't leave his room because everyone was told they had to stay in their rooms. And the worker would occasionally bring their father down to see them through a patio door at the back of the home. And he had lost so much weight that, and this sounds very sad, but his pants fell down without a belt on as they were standing there. And they were absolutely devastated by this vision of this very powerful man who was their father and had just literally shrunk within a few months from this time. And there are other experiences where I've interviewed nurses who speak about the PTSD they experience, and families as well are having the same experience as well. But just their voices even after a year of, mourning someone, their voices, they tremble as they speak when they go back to those memories of what they experienced. And it's a very, very tragic time for a lot of people.
Well, I really loved reading your book, and as I said to you in an email, I felt like you were a girlfriend sitting across the couch, and we were sharing a glass of wine, and you were telling me the story. And there's a lot of hope in the book that you're reading, and in that book that you wrote. And I really like how you wove your parents' story into the book. And first of all, I'd like to extend my condolences to you for the loss of both of your parents. I believe it was this past year that you lost both of them.
Yes.
So, can you talk a little bit about whether your investigative work, about long-term care and research into alternative approaches, was it influenced by your parents' aging?
It was in a way, although I think I am like many other people I've discovered, and we put it off, the planning. And I realize now that that was a mistake. My parents lived quite well on their own for a long time. My mother, I started to say to her, maybe you should get a personal support worker to come in and help cook some meals, because she had started injuring her leg and kept re-injuring it, which actually led to them moving into a retirement home. But, she was the master of her home, and she was not going to have anyone else coming in. And so she put me off on that attempt. But I do realize now when I talk to other people that planning for the future is really important, because you don't know when a very vibrant person is going to suddenly become fragile. And that's exactly what happened to my mom. And so they moved into a retirement home. And what I saw while I was traveling around going to these beautiful long-term care or retirement homes, what I saw was back in Ontario and in Canada, we have so few choices available to us, especially if you live in a smaller town.
So actually, that's a perfect inroad to my next question. Is really one of the most difficult decisions that a family member has to make is really to transition a loved one from their home to a residence. I work with many families where, the parent or the spouse has made, their partners or their children promise that they would never place them in a home, with even some threats of taking away their inheritance. And, but however, with illnesses such as dementia, in the majority of cases, it sometimes becomes impossible for someone to remain at home, especially with the amount of, 24-hour care that's required. So can you comment on this decision process that people have to go to, as well as, you talk about guilt, being an emotion that can torment people, especially when care goes wrong?
Yes, it's really important that families, I think, again, speak about planning for the future. But in my travels, I encountered a man named Scott Tardy who ran a day program in San Diego. He had been in the long-term care industry for many, many years. And we were speaking in his office, and he started talking about guilt. And I devoted a number of pages to it in my book, because I just really feel that it was so important. And the points that he was making were just so key. And he talked about, families, siblings not being able to agree. There are fights break out within families. Someone might live 3,000 kilometers away and feel that, the person who's back home working a full-time job and raising children should be able to also care for a parent who needs a lot of help and attention. So there's all of that to deal with. Then there's the concern that you are going to lose your inheritance because the cost is so expensive. And so all these different issues come into play with families. And so what I think is, in addition to having a good plan, my goal is to, through my book and by talking to other people who are also advocates in this field, to find better homes, better philosophies of care so people don't have to feel guilty. And for example, in San Diego, Scott Tardy ran a very enriched day program. So, and his point was, people don't feel guilty when they pick up their husband or mother at the end of the day because they've had a really good time in the program. Same with a good home. People do not feel that horrible guilt because the home is bright with life and their loved one is flourishing.
So before you start showing us some images of the homes that you have visited and like seen, which offer this hope, when the term seniors residence is used, the image that almost always comes to mind, for many people, is that of a hospital-like setting with several people parked in wheelchairs or lying in their beds waiting to be fed, bathed, and changed. So what are some of the most significant differences between these stark realities and the residences that you profile in your book?
I think it's the energy that you feel, and it's a bit of an intangible, actually, but there definitely is just a connection in the homes between the workers and the residents. And for example, one of the homes I went to just outside of Atlanta, people were just kibitzing with each other, just having, fun conversations and teasing, the in-house chef and so on. So there was just a lot of fun in those homes. And I think that's just a piece of it. It's a natural existence. It's not a contrived, today we are going to do this at this time and everyone's, going to have a good time. It's more of just a natural flow of life and people able to engage in activities that have meaning to them.
Okay, well, I would really like to now give you the opportunity to share some of the images of the homes that you've been profiling.
So this is a lovely home just outside of Atlanta, Georgia, and Park Springs, it is called. And it was actually created by a man who was a developer in Georgia and realized that his mom had Alzheimer's and really struggled to find good care. So her experience inspired him to create this lovely community. And he ended up adding skilled nursing to the community because he realized that people didn't want to move away when they became more fragile later on. So this home started with the butterfly program and moved into its own philosophy of care and just really focuses on people living in the moment and engaging with them and really connecting with them, whether it's through gardening, as you see here. When I was there, they were having dance parties because it was Christmas. And actually, one of the executive director actually told me this lovely story of a woman who was quite forlorn when she moved in there originally, but they started playing music and they put on an Elvis album. And she, instead of staying in her room, she burst out of her room and went down. It was actually this hallway you're seeing here into this living room and where everyone was playing the music and started singing and dancing to this Elvis song because she connected with that music from her youth. And after that, she was very engaged in the home and they felt it was a bit of an awakening. They said they all cried when they saw this happen. So that's what this home has. Its philosophy is, and it's got pretty great weather. Not all of us have the opportunity to spend a lot of time outside, but they also have in-house chefs in this home. So every household has their own chef, and they make Southern home cooking meals prepared on site. There's nothing that's brought in pre-planned food. It's all made on site. And so that really helps with people with weight and other issues as well. So, and again, because it's a butterfly home, they originally was a butterfly home. They used a lot of bright paint on the walls. So this is a butterfly home in London, Ontario. It was one of the second homes to follow through with this program, the first being Peel Region, which I wrote about for the Toronto Star. And again, they create doors that give people perhaps a sense of their own location, help people find their way through the home instead of the long beige corridors and beige floors that can be very misleading to people. Their philosophy is to bring in a lot of different pieces of items, hang them on the wall, perhaps to stir memories, perhaps to help engage people. And they also have done a lot of work around the feelings of people with cognitive decline, especially when people are having perhaps memories from many years ago. And some of those can be quite traumatic, actually. And they talk about the loneliness of being in a home when you're experiencing something pretty significant from your past, but nobody understands what it is. So this is the Glenner Town Square program. It's a day program in San Diego, and they created this sort of trying to work with reminiscence therapy in a sense in this to try to bring people together. I think if you don't like the 1950s, you probably won't like this day program, but it's very, very interesting, and people spend a lot of time engaged, and they do yoga, they do music. There are all sorts of different programs down there, and that helps keep people out of long-term care. The Eden alternative is a philosophy that has been around since the early 1990s. I went to a home in Saskatoon. It's called the Sherbrooke Community Center. They also pioneered, in a sense, the small household design. One of the beautiful parts of this home is the artist studio, and they have an artist in residence, and people go there. People who had no idea that they could paint actually have discovered this innate talent and have had their work shown. They do a lot of work, as you can see, with horticulture, and they have massive gardens outside as well. There are a lot of pets in the home, dogs, cats, a lot of birds, and there's a guinea pig named Harrison Ford. And here you can see the art gallery as well. The artist in residence is the woman with the blonde hair. And she used to bring her dog in as well. So it's a pretty interesting setting. But they focus on giving people the opportunity to flourish in life, no matter what their age or vulnerability. And here you can see, or you just saw the iGen program, which brings in students from outside, elementary students who teach and who are taught by the residents of the home. This is one of my favorite communities, Carroll Woods Retirement Community in Chapel Hill. It is set in 125 acres of soaring oak trees, and they have a very strong philosophy that brings together people of all abilities, whether you have cognitive decline or you have no memory loss whatsoever. Everyone has the equal right to live a full life there. And people who don't have cognitive decline are also trained, in a sense, to help those along. If somebody needs help getting home, the other residents will help them. But there's a huge amount of freedom available to people here. And I saw people out gardening and pushing wheelbarrows and so on. So it's a very full life. De Hogevik in the Netherlands is some people would know it as the dementia village, although they don't like that term there. But it is an enclosed village design. They actually wished now, in hindsight, that they had made it more open to the community. But they have the ability for people, they all live in very small households of 6 or 7 people. They eat together, they eat with the staff, they can cook together, they can go shop in a store, but they can step out of the home whenever they wish, go sit in a courtyard, they can go listen to music, or just walk around this fairly large setting. So those are some of the examples of homes that give people a lot of emotional connections to each other and freedom of movement, which I think is so important in our lives, no matter what our abilities are.
So thank you, and that was so enlightening. And I notice, however, a lot of what you've been profiling are residences located in the U.S. So how has Canada are provinces adapting these or adopting these principles as well? Like what's happening in our country?
Slowly but surely, change is coming. So, for example, the village concept, they're in Langley, BC. They were very much inspired by De Hoogovik in the Netherlands. So they built a village concept there. And I believe on Vancouver Island, two more home-like settings will be built with a similar concept. So that is beginning. For let me say, in Saskatchewan, I think that the Sherbrooke Community Center has been around for a long time and has done very innovative work there. They're now talking about new ideas of building on site a home and a residence for people where you could have life leases, for example. People of all ages could live together. There would be a coffee shop, exercise rooms, and connections to the home itself. So people can literally age in place. And in Ontario, things have been slower, but it's starting to happen. And it's gratifying to see that people are starting to talk about these different philosophies. When I first published my story in 2018, people, again, as I said, had no idea that these options were available. And now they're in discussions. And I'll give you some examples. The two long-term care associations highlighted these ideas and the need for them in their recommendations for our new legislation. We had a long-term care commission, which said that the person-directed care is at the foundation of all of their recommendations. So these topics were not discussed a few years ago. They are being now. And there's a really interesting new idea of, it's not necessarily new, but it's new in Ontario, the campus of care idea. And so while in some cases that could mean a long-term care home and, maybe a library or something on site, some organizations are trying to expand that. So they're making it very inclusive, bringing the community in and people of all ages. And Trent University is one that is going to build a home on its land. It's going to have its students working within the home, students who are studying issues around aging, and also bringing the community in a really significant way. So those are new ideas that are evolving.
So I guess an important question that many people are wondering about are these homes. I'm assuming they're private, and does it require a lot of money to be able to go and stay in one of these homes?
So these homes are a mix. Most of them are actually not for profit. And so you still have to spend a certain amount of money to live there every month, but they're not any more expensive than any other home. The ones in Ontario I'm talking about, Carroll Woods, and some of the other homes, you would put down a certain amount of money to buy into the community and then perhaps pay a certain amount per month as well. So those are people, you have to have means to live in some of those American homes, definitely. In Ontario, I haven't seen a lot of for-profit retirement homes where you can pay up to $10,000 a month, for example, going in this direction. It's mostly the long-term care homes that are licensed by the government that are doing this and finding ways to do that, especially in the municipally operated homes. They're really pushing forward with that, as are some privately operated long-term care homes as well.
And are the majority of these homes able to accommodate the person until, especially somebody with dementia, until the very end of their life? Like, do they have long-term care capabilities, or is this, kind of like an interim place until they have to go to be transferred to the long-term care?
No, that's a good question. So, for example, the home that I visited near Atlanta, they started as this very gorgeous, exclusive retirement home. But he realized that because people were starting to age over time and they didn't want to move elsewhere and leave their friends behind, that he needed to build a skilled nursing home as well. So in that case, he created that the opportunity for people to stay. The others are all generally long-term care homes. You can, whether they're officially a long-term care or a nursing home or not, you can move in at a certain point and you can leave when you're 95 years old, you can stay as long as you need to stay, basically. So you can age in place.
Okay, so I'm going to just read, you wrote in your introduction, for decades, long-term care has operated on a tight budget, draining the life pleasure of the people who reside within while devaluing the work of staff, forcing many to work in 2 or 3 locations just to make a living wage. So, and you also say, and workers are more likely to succeed if they have jobs that are meaningful. So taking everything that you've now shown us today, in your opinion, what do we need to do to make this the norm, this alternative way of living the norm rather than the exception?
Excellent question. So it starts with operators and showing operators what is possible, because even now, a lot of people don't think beyond the institutional model that they've been trained in. And frankly, when people come up through the ranks in institutions, they hold on. It's very comfortable, it's safe, it works. In their minds, it is efficient. What we need to do is to show how these new ideas can actually help in many ways save money, so there's a return on investment. And I'll give you an example, the greenhouse project in the United States. I was speaking to the woman who runs the organization. They will then go and train nursing homes to use their philosophy and designs. But she was speaking about savings in the US for $125,000 or $150,000 a year on supplements, because they have an open kitchen concept and you can go and eat when you wish to eat. You're living in a very small household. People don't need to drink Ensure to keep their weight up any longer. And they don't throw out Ensure as well after someone takes a few sips. So people are healthier, stronger. So there are, that's one specific example of a savings. So I think if we talk about these ideas, show what can work for the operators, how it can save money for governments. Often there are fewer trips to the hospital and so on. And at the same time, right now, we are all experiencing a deficit in the number of workers in homes. People have left. So if you give people jobs that have meaning, give them the autonomy to make decisions around the emotional needs of the residents, not necessarily the medical needs, but the emotional and social interests of the residents, then they'll feel like they have a purpose as well. And we all want purpose in our lives. So these are just a few examples of ways that homes can actually improve the system for everyone.
So we know that in Canada, it really requires also a partnership from the government. So do we have the political will necessary to make these changes?
Another interesting question. And so, I spoke to someone I knew who was a longtime politician with the municipal government in Toronto for many years. And he said, you have to plant the seed. And you have to plant the seed in the minds of the bureaucrats first. So it's not unusual. It seems very natural to them. And then you have to push the politicians. And when you can combine and connect those philosophies, then you can actually make change. It's possible that this is happening in Ontario now. I might be, I don't want to be overly optimistic, but I know that the bureaucrats are actually talking about these ideas now. I know from people who are dealing with the ministry that it remains to be seen how dedicated the politicians are to these concepts, but it's moving forward. But you're absolutely right. You do need governments to support these and fund these programs.
Moira, thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today on McGill Cares. How can people get a copy of your book?
Oh, they can go to any independent bookstore. They can go to Amazon or Chapters Indico and order a book. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here with us today. So this webcast is an initiative of the McGill Dementia Education Program, which is funded by private donations. Once again, I would like to sincerely thank the Zeller Family Foundation for sponsoring today's webcast. If you would like to make a contribution to our program or for more information, please visit us at mcgill.ca/dementia. And if you would like to join our mailing list to be notified about upcoming episodes of McGill Cares, as well as other important program and resources from us, please email us at dementia@mcgill.ca. Thank you for watching.